Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. I'm coming to you from inside my workshop today because I'm going to be doing an instructional video. I haven't done one of these in quite a while, but this one I hope should be very useful to a lot of people out there. And in this video I'm going to show you how to replace the deteriorated prism in your Olympus OM-1 SLR camera. The Olympus OM-1 is one of the, I guess, landmark cameras of the 20th century. It was designed by Mr. Yoshihisa Maitani, and it was probably his crowning achievement as a designer at the Olympus company. It's a really wonderful, compact, fully mechanical camera, and the OM lenses which fit it are first rate. A really wonderful camera. It has no real weaknesses in it. It's the shutter mechanism, the light meter, everything about these cameras is incredibly reliable. But it does have one minor weakness, and that is the prism itself. It's not the prism itself that is at fault, but it is the fault of a rubber spacer which fits between the mounting bracket and the prism itself. The prism is meant to, the rubber spacer is meant to keep even tension on the prism and hold it in place and protect it from being cracked or damaged if the camera is dropped or whatever. But the rubber material deteriorates over time. It's the same material used in the light seals and such. And the breakdown of this rubber seems to cause a chemical reaction to the paint on the prism and the metal coating underneath. So a lot of these cameras you'll pick up and you'll look through the viewfinder and you'll see a bunch of blackish grayish stuff in the image across the bottom. It's a really common problem, and maybe half or more than half of the old Olympus OM-1 cameras I come across suffer from this problem. And the earlier M1 cameras, pretty much everyone I've ever come across has this problem. But luckily, it's not a difficult problem to fix. Unfortunately, Olympus doesn't manufacture or sell replacement prisms for these cameras anymore, but you can still find them quite easily. I have pretty much an unlimited source of these in Japan, and that source is these later OM cameras, like the OM-30 and OM-40, or even the OM-20. These cameras, though they look a lot different and they are, I guess, fully automatic electronically controlled cameras, they have the same prism, and it's quite easy to adapt the prism from one of these cameras into the old Olympus OM-1. So in order to do this job, you're going to either need a prism or one of these old cameras. Here in Japan, these things cost around $10 or so for a beat-up old Olympus OM-40 like this one is. And you'll need a few tools. You'll need a Phillips screwdriver like this one here. And I have a couple of slotted screwdrivers, mainly to use as scrapers, because I might need to do some scraping of stuff to try to get it cleaned out. And you'll need a pointed spanner like this one, or you can also substitute a pair of strong tweezers with sharp points. Or if you have an old pair of needle nose pliers and or something like that, you can grind or file the tips into sharp points. Unfortunately, this is an essential tool for the job, so you're going to need something like this to be able to do it. So, a couple of the things we'll need: lens cleaning tissues like these here, lens cleaning fluid like this here, and pure cotton swabs like these ones which I have here. So, let's take a break for a moment, and when we come back we'll dig into the job. Alright, welcome back. The scenery has changed here a little bit because I'm going to go ahead and remove the replacement prism from my donor camera here. And I need a couple of tools to do this. I guess maybe a pointer or a screwdriver with a sharper point, because I need to pry a few things off of this as I'm taking it apart. So go ahead and start at the top, and the first thing I do is I take off this rubber cap over the winding lever. And then a Phillips screw holds on the winding lever. And I need to remove this film speed adjustment knob, so I've got to remove this cap here. It's got a lot of scratches and damage on it already. Okay. Okay, and remove the Phillips screw under that. Go ahead and discard these things because I don't need them anymore. Go ahead and remove the film rewind knob like so. And I'll remove all of these Phillips screws, which are all around the camera. The OM-40 is not a bad camera, but it's not very popular with shooters. Most people prefer to have something with which is not battery dependent, or at least a lot of I guess film enthusiasts or more old school kind of people like myself. If you have one of these cameras, it's actually superior in a lot of ways for a beginner than the earlier OM-1 because it has things like the spot mode and such like that, but these cameras, for whatever reason, they're just not very popular here in Japan, or I don't know how popular they are in other places, but they have little or no value here, so I don't feel terribly guilty about tearing one apart to fix an older and simpler camera. Okay. And the top should come off like so. And you can see a whole mess of electronics and things like that here. The spring on the side, I'll go ahead and hold on to that because these I do some repairs on these OM cameras, and the spring is one of these things which tends to be alive and walk away on its own and disappear, and whenever I need one I can't find one. So whenever I take apart one of these OM-40s here, I'll make sure to keep the spring in a safe place because I can use these on the earlier cameras as well. Okay, and let's see, I've got some cutters here somewhere. I thought I had. I set them just somewhere around here. I guess it's not so important at the moment. So what I need to do next is I need to just remove this electronic stuff on the top. Remove the top cover, and then I'll take out these screws to remove the film speed setting dial. And there's more. There's a third one down here. Oh, another one here. They use a lot of hardware to put these things together. It'd be quite an adventure finding all of it. Ah, yes, and the one back here. Okay, and that kind of lifts out of the way. And a few more screws here. Screws on the front. Okay, and there I've just kind of pulled away everything, and what we have left here is we have this bracket here, and below that is this kind of a plastic shield which protects the bracket from damaging the prism. And I'll remove these two screws on the bracket and then lift it off and put it in a safe place. And then lift off the spacer, and I need to wedge out the prism a little bit. One good thing that they put on these later cameras that the earlier ones don't have is this little spacer, or I guess dust shield here. And once this is out of the way, let me go ahead and take these off because I might have to pry on this thing a little bit to get it out. Okay, and the prism comes out like so. And you can see it's got a wire and stuff on it, but all we have to do is just pull this off like so. And that's it, and this is our prism. We go ahead and discard this other stuff. Okay, so this is our replacement prism here, and this prism has this rubber sealing around the side, so we'll just take this off and peel it off rather carefully so we don't pull off any of the paint or anything which is underneath of it. Don't want to damage your new prism before you have a chance to put it in your old OM-1. Okay, and there it is. And I think this is 65.8, so 18. So this was made in, I guess, if you decode the Japanese dates here, so we have a date here which looks like it's I think August and 9th, and we have the number here 60, which I believe is for the Showa era. So Showa 60 would be something about 1985, 1986 this camera was made. So anyway, I've got the prism out, so I'm going to go ahead and set it to the side, and the next thing we're going to do is remove the faulty prism in this one and replace it. So let's take a break and I'll be right back. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started in removing the prism on our OM camera, or OM-1. The first thing we're going to do is remove this shoe here. And here we find another kind of issue we have with these cameras, these flash shoes which are mounted on them. Also have this kind of faulty rubber stuff on them which dry rots and tends to damage the paint or the chrome metal finish if you have a silver finish camera. If you're shopping for these on the internet and you want really a clean camera, beware of cameras which still have the hot shoe mounted on them. Personally, I wouldn't buy one of these because I would want, unless I could see the top without the shoe on it, if I'm really picky about the appearance of the camera. So this was an option, and not a lot of people used it or put it on, and you can usually find these cameras for sale that have never had a shoe mounted on them, and that's what I would look for if I were going to buy one of these. Alright, I'll go ahead and remove the film rewind knob, and just like I've removed it in other ones, you put a screwdriver in the forks and just twist it off like so. And you can remove the film doors on these, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it on because I have to move the camera around a lot and I don't want to accidentally touch or bump into the shutter curtains. Next thing I'm going to do is set the film speed to where it has the least tension on it. So something right there, like ASA 25. Because when I pull things off, this knob engages the light meter underneath, and I want it to line back up properly when I put it back on top. Next thing I want to do is remove this nut on the center of the prism, and use my pointed tool for that. Now this has to come off, so keep that in mind. I use these old lens filters as a place to put the hardware so I don't misplace it. The next thing to remove, and this is one of the difficult parts of this job, is the screw which holds on the winding arm. These are kind of difficult to get off, and you can easily scratch the cap here on the top because the screw is actually under a thin black metal, I guess, piece here which is just glued in. And you're pretty much kind of like doomed to causing up some kind of damage. If you try to pry it up, you're going to bend it and scratch it. So in most cases, the holes on the cover here line up with the holes in the screw. So if you use these as a guide for your tool, it'll usually get you in the right spot, but more than likely you're the tool is going to slip once or twice and scratch this cap. You can touch it up with some glossy black paint, but it's just something that is probably is going to happen anytime you try to get this part off, unless you're really, really lucky. And I was really, really lucky in that time. Normally I make a video, the worst of things happen rather than things going as smoothly as I would like. Okay, take the cap off like so, and there will be a plastic spacer underneath that. Keep that. And then the winding lever itself comes off. And then underneath the winding lever we have a nut which holds on the top cover. We have some spacers here usually as well. Not always. Sometimes we have them, sometimes we don't. But it's important that the spacers either stay on or are replaced when you put the camera back together. If the spacers are not put back on, the arm may rub on the top cover, and you don't want that to happen. Alright, and we'll go ahead and move on to this side. There are 2 Phillips screws here which have to be removed. Olympus used a similar system for a lot of their cameras, and the OM-1 here, which is invented or released in 1971 or 72, is held on kind of in the same way, or held together in the same way as the earlier rangefinder and Olympus pin half-frame cameras. Okay, so everything is off, so the top cover should more or less lift off now. And there you go. I'll go ahead and set that to the side. And I'll move this up a little bit closer. You can see this foam rubber all around here is very rotten and dried up, and that's caused the deterioration of the front foam. Now if I'm looking at this camera here, this camera says 50, November 20th, 1950, so that would make it was made in October 20th of 1975. And this is a different system than what I see on some of the earlier OM-1 cameras. The early ones have kind of a metal cap on the top, which is held on with a couple of springs and then a couple of shoes underneath, which the screws mount on. If you are working on one of these earlier cameras, be very careful when you take out the screws that they don't fly away. The screws which hold on this bracket are kind of a unique size, and if you get lost, you're going to be in trouble. So when you are taking off the screws which hold on the cap, hold on to the center with your thumb and take out the screw, and then gently let the cover slide to the side and put the screws in a very safe place. I use a screwdriver with a magnetic tip, so I don't lose the screws. It'll pull the screw off when I take it off of the top. And when you take off one side, the other side you don't have to worry about the spring making it fly away or get lost. So let's go ahead and take another break for a moment, and then I'll proceed to remove the prism on this camera. Okay, so let's go ahead and get everything removed. For those of you who are a little bit worried about getting anywhere farther past this point, a good thing to do if you're worried about not putting something back in the right place or losing something is just to take a photo of your progress or each step with your phone or whatever, so you know where everything is and where everything should be lined up. I've got the tab here on the light meter, which is lined up pretty much with the brass bracket on the back here, so if it moves at all, I'll be able to adjust it back and get it within the ballpark. And there's pretty much not much else on here. It's a lot simpler than that OM-40 camera I took apart a few minutes ago. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this washer here, which sits on this bracket, and the top cover mounts on here, and if you don't have this washer, if you tighten the nut down to hold on the top cover, it can distort it a little bit. So if you have washers here, most times you'll have a washer, sometimes you won't. It depends on the camera. And then I'll go ahead and remove the screws which hold on this this bracket. And I'll go ahead and lift it off, and you can kind of see this mess. It's just falling apart, and right here on the edges of the prism, you can kind of see where the foam is eaten into the paint, and it has these white lines, kind of a chemical reaction showing where the damage is. So let me go ahead, and I've got the waste basket under here. I'm going to go ahead and brush off some of this excess foam to get it out of the way, with the camera kind of not upside down, just kind of backwards, so I can get it off. And this will prevent it from moving around or getting into places in the camera where I don't want it to go. Okay, here's a piece of this foam. As you can see, it just kind of turns into dirt and dust, and you don't want that getting around inside your camera. Okay, so I want to clean this off here. So what I do to get it cleaned off properly is I'm going to take some lacquer thinner, and I'm just going to make it wet. And this will ensure that I get it all off, not just some of it. I want to remove the rubber and the glue as well. And I'll just move this out of the way, and move the sink wire a little bit there to get it more out of the way. Next thing we'll do is we'll remove the prism itself. And you can see the screws on either side. You might have to move the wiring about a little bit to reach them. I always start on this side first. Okay, and as this doesn't have springs on it, I'll go ahead and work on removing the other side as well. And probably lift it off as kind of a complete unit. I'm glad Olympus kind of made an improvement in the bracket which holds on. Remember I said earlier, don't lose these screws. I have a second filter here, so I'll put them there so I don't get them mixed up or lost. Okay, and there's the other screw, and I'll just put the bracket there and lift off this cover, and then the prism will come out like so. And maybe you can, if you look in the camera, you can see kind of the area near where my thumbs are. You can see the deterioration in the glass. So yeah, pretty severe in this one here. So I'll go ahead and put this in the rubbish bin. So I want to go ahead and remove the focusing screen here because I don't want to get it scratched or damaged. And when you take out a focusing screen, these are incredibly easy to scratch. They're made out of plastic, so I'll take them and I'll put them on I have a carpeted workspace here, so I'll just go ahead and set it to the side. I don't have to worry about it getting scratched. And next thing here is to kind of clean out the glass here on the back through the viewfinder. This always gets really dirty and dusty when the rubber foam gets rotted. So I'll go ahead and brush that off a little bit. And I've got the worst of it off. Then I'll go ahead and blow it out with my blower here. Okay, and I'll go ahead and clean it up a little bit. I'll take a cotton swab, and to make the cotton swabs work a little easier, I just bend the tips over 90 degrees using a pair of pliers. Little lens cleaning fluid, and then clean like so. Take another one and clean the back. The back was especially dirty. Go ahead and look through. Looks pretty clean. I'll clean it one more time. It's kind of like the old, like, I don't know, popular saying in photography, measure twice, cut once. So I cleaned twice. I hate when I do cleaning and I think I got it right, and I put the camera back together and I look through and I see a fingerprint or something like that, and then I have to take it all apart and to get the fingerprint out, whereas if I had been a little bit more careful the first time, it would have saved me a lot of work. Alright, so that's pretty clean, and go ahead and blow it out again. And this is kind of soaked in and loosened all this. What I'm going to do is pull it back here and just kind of scrape this off into my rubbish bin, which is located under my bench here. Now you don't want to break the wire if you can help it. If you break it, then you won't be able to use a flash on the camera. A lot of you would probably never think of using a flash on one of these old film cameras, but maybe one day you'll want to sell it and the person who buys it would like to use a flash. So it's always good to make sure that you do as little harm as possible when you're putting together a camera or doing any kind of service to it. Alright, so it's nice and clean now, and no deterioration. I'm going to go ahead and scrape away any small pieces here. Some are coming off. These are not likely to come off in the future, but this will make it even less likely. Blow it off again. Alright, so the camera is ready to have the new prism installed, so let's take a break for a minute and then we'll go ahead and get started on that step. Okay, so the next thing to do is take our replacement prism, and first I'll inspect it for damage. Looking through the back and bottom, you can see if there's any problems with it. I've got a couple more of these OM-40s in my closet, so if this one's no good, I can take out another one and use one of those prisms. But it looks really good. So far, I haven't had any issue with these being bad. They were made much better than the earlier ones. And if you replace the prism, you probably get who knows how many years before you ever have to worry about doing this kind of job again. So let's go ahead and clean up the glass. And I want this to be especially clean. So I'll go ahead and start first with using the cotton swab and then a microfiber cloth. The microfiber cloth always leaves bits of microfiber on the glass, so then I'll go ahead and go over it again with my genuine Nikon or Nikon, as we say in Japan, lens cloth. Then we'll go ahead and clean the back side here. And same process, microfiber, and then lens tissue. The lens tissue leaves little bits of fiber as well, but they blow off very easily compared to the cotton or stuff from cotton swabs. Alright, nice and clean, and then we drop it in carefully and make sure that it sits in flat. It's quite possible to put this in the wrong way and it doesn't fit exactly square. You can tell when it's in, when it's nice, and the line on the top is running straight back and it's lined up with the center of the eyepiece, and we have the same amount of distance on the corners here as the top corners of the front of the camera. Sometimes they sit a little bit, you accidentally put it like down like that. You don't want to do that. And a problem that you have to be careful of is sometimes these wires on the side here can get underneath the prism, and when you look through with a viewfinder you'll see a wire next to the meter needle or something like that, so you don't want that to happen. So all right, let me look through just to be sure. Okay. And also, when you look through the viewfinder, sometimes you can see fingerprints or things like that that you can't so easily see when you are actually cleaning it. But looking through the viewfinder, it's nice and clean. So the next thing we have to do is replace the bracket which holds on the prism. So I'll go ahead and make sure the wires are a little bit out of the way here without breaking them. I don't want to get out my soldering iron here and do more work than I'd planned to do on this camera. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put on this protective film. We have the clear one, which came with OM-1. We have this black one, which came with OM-40. I'll go ahead and put the clear one on. And the next thing to do is put on the cover, or I guess the bracket. This bracket here should fit like this, angling toward the back, and with these kind of facing down that way. If you have the older style with the bracket and the springs and the feet on the side, you'll kind of see that they are angled a little bit this way, so you want to make sure to have it on the right direction. It's possible to put it on backwards, and you don't want to do that. It would probably still work, but it's something that yeah, it's better to do it as properly as possible. Okay, and I'll go ahead and turn this around like so. And of course the wires want to be in my way. For those of you who remember the expression Murphy's Law, it applies to pretty much anything mechanical, and especially cameras, which I've found. Okay. And the screw is still on the tip of my screwdriver here. Oop. Yeah, normally it goes on more easily than this. It's only difficult when I'm trying to do a video about how to do the job. Okay, that's in. And this blue wire is kind of gotten in the way a little bit, which I should fully expect. The brown wire can be moved out quite a distance if it's in the way, and you can just tuck it back. Okay, there it goes. Make sure they're both snug. I don't put them on super tight, just a little bit. Okay. Alright, now the prism is in place. Let me take a look through the back. Nice and clean and clear. The next thing to do is replace the bracket here for the flash sink. And make sure the wires are kind of tucked out of the way. This top cover here is really grungy and dirty. I'm going to brush off the worst of the dirt and dust. This is one of the black paint cameras where they took a chrome cover and they painted it black. With the Olympus OM-1 it can come either way. It can have a black painted brass cover or a black painted chrome plated cover. The brass I think looks a little bit better when the paint scratches off, but and most people I think prefer the silver cameras nowadays. And they are a bit easier to clean and maintain. I'll go ahead and clean this off by putting a little bit of my lacquer thinner on it. And then scrubbing it off a little bit. Okay, well, it's cleaner than it was. We'll go ahead and put it back together, and the first thing to do is put on the spacer here on the shoe. Excuse me, flash shoe hot sink, whatever you want to call it, and then lower the top down. When you lower the top down, there's one quirky thing that you have to be careful of, and that is that this plunger for the shutter goes into the hole here on the top. It's hit and miss whether it goes on the first time or second or third time. What I'll do is I'll hold up the camera like this, and with a screwdriver I'll kind of try to guide it in. Sometimes it doesn't want to be guided in. Okay, there it goes. Alright, next thing to hold things in place, I'll just put in the nut here for the flash sink. Before I put the top on, I was making sure that the tab on the light meter was lined up in the right position. It hadn't moved while I worked on the camera. I was careful not to touch it. So it's in the correct position, and you can kind of feel the tension change. If it's not in the right position, this dial is going to be really tough and not move correctly. So once again, when you're disassembling the camera, make sure, as I said, set this to 25 and make sure that the location, you note the location of the arm on the meter. As I pointed out earlier when I was taking apart the camera, it makes it much easier to put it together and avoiding any potential problems. Not so much problems, but complications is probably a better word. Replace the Phillips screws. Then replace the nut. Oh wait, I always forget something, and I know I mentioned that spring earlier, the one that I always keep because I always misplace them and lose them. I forgot to put that in place. Okay, and it's not the first time I've done it. I have some kind of, I don't know, mental block or something which prevents me from putting this spring in the Olympus cameras. And it's not just the Olympus cameras which have it. So here's the spring, and it goes on this dowel right here. This is necessary because this provides the spring tension for the latch, which holds the back door shut. And of course, now I've got to deal with my plunger for the shutter button again. And of course, it won't go on as easily this time as it did last time. Okay, but I'll keep trying. It's really odd because normally when I am doing the lining up the shutter plunger, it's so easy. It usually just takes a touch and it goes in, but as I said, making a video about something always makes it more difficult. Okay. Alright, so now we can go ahead and put the rest of the parts back on. The Phillips screws, be careful not to over tighten these screws or any other screws on the top of the camera. I've had some experience in the past where, oh wow, well, you know, they popped out. God, it's crazy. Okay, I guess the third time is the charm here. If I didn't put that back in, some of you with sharp eyes would point it out and say, hey, you replaced that spring, but it popped right back out, and you didn't even notice it. So yeah, I noticed it now, too late. Okay. Okay, right there. Now it's in, the spring is on. The nut is back on. Now we'll do the Phillips screws again. Okay, and everything looks okay. I'll put this nut back on. Try it on the right way. I guess either way. There's no right way for the nut to go on. It can go on. There's no top or bottom side. But for some reason, they often, one side works more easy than the other when putting them on. I'll make this snug but not too tight. I might have mentioned before, I don't tighten them down too much because if I do, for some reason, sometimes it causes a wire in the meter to short and the meter doesn't work. And if I loosen these back up, the meter starts working again. So now to save myself from that trouble, I just don't make them too tight. Put the spacer washer back on. Winding lever. Plastic spacer, and then the nut. And then the rewind knob. Go ahead and pop this open so I can get it properly tight. And then I blow off the, hold on to this tight so it doesn't fly away. Focusing screen, and take a look through it. Beautiful, nice and clean and clear. I've got lens here, pop it back on. So that's pretty much it for the job. It didn't take that long, maybe less than an hour or so. Not a lot of specialized tools other than a pointed spanner of some kind. Anyway, the repair on this camera is done. It has a few more things that have to be done to it before it's ready to go. It needs a much more cleaning up, and I need to replace the light seals and the mirror bumper and a few other things like that. But once this camera is ready, I'll be posting it for sale in my online store. So if you want to buy this camera, please check back in a few days. I should have it ready by then. I plan to post more videos, how-to videos and camera reviews in the near future. If you'd like to see these videos, please subscribe. If you liked the video, if it was helpful for you too, please click the like button. That always helps. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.